everybody for coming. I apologize for the traffic. I know maybe a late arriving crowd as we go through here, but at least all of our candidates got here, so we appreciate that. I'm Jack Manning, Executive Director of the Beaver County Chamber of Commerce. For those of you that don't know me, we're thrilled and pleased to be able to bring once again our state legislators together for debate in these three debates. And we'll introduce the candidates in a bit. I do just want to acknowledge our main sponsor for this event, Nova Chemicals. Without the contributions of our member sponsors, we aren't able to cover the cost and do these kinds of events, so we thank Nova. We also like to thank Penn State Beaver, who has always been a very gracious host in accommodating the debate for us. And we always appreciate them as a chamber member and as a sponsor to events. I do want to just go through a couple of basic ground rules before we get started. I do remind the audience that no applause or reaction to questions or answer the questions. You may certainly applaud when the candidates come on stage, and when they're finished at the end there, feel free to applaud, but we don't want disruptions during the course of the debate. No video or photography, flash photography is permitted. By the meeting, again, we don't run anything that will distract the candidates. The debate format consists of a brief 1-minute opening by each of the candidates as they come on stage. After the brief openings, they will be posed questions that have been submitted by chamber members, and particularly our Government Affairs Committee at the Chamber over the course of several weeks. Each candidate will be posed a question. They have 2 minutes to respond to that question, and then there will be a 1-minute rebuttal by their opponent. The debate will conclude with each candidate giving a 2-minute closing summary. Official time for the questioning will be conducted by our chamber staff. There will be a little yellow dot that comes up, and that means the candidate has 10 seconds left to finish that. The red dot means their time is up. The bell means that's it. You're done, and if that doesn't work, our moderator will give them the hook. I would like to introduce our moderator. Unfortunately, Alex Trebek wasn't available tonight, but I think we have a viable substitute. Scott Bonnet is the vice chair of our Chamber of Government Affairs Committee. He's been involved with the Chamber for many years. Scott's the associate vice president and director of facilities and grounds for CCBC, and he's agreed to be our moderator tonight. So, Scott, take over. The floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to introduce our panelists for this evening. First, we have Tom Bickert, who is the editorial editor of the Beaver County Times. Larissa Dudkiewicz is a freelance journalist for Lincoln Learning Solutions and Ambridge Connections. And Mike Rubino, who's the executive director of the United Way of Beaver County. I'd like to reiterate the audience instructions one more time before we begin the debate. Out of courtesy to the candidates, please no flash photography, and please silence your cell phones, or heaven forbid, turn them off. Please refrain from yelling, clapping, or any visible or audible expression of support or opposition for the candidates. You may clap at the beginning of the debate and at the end of the debate when the debate is finished. If any member of the audience demonstrates unreasonably disruptive behavior, we're going to stop the debate and we're going to have that individual removed from the auditorium. So I'm sure everybody's going to be on their best behavior. Finally, my job is to keep the debate flowing. We're going to focus on the questions and the responses, and if the candidates go over, I'm going to encourage them to move on to the next question. With that being said, our first debate is going to be between Cameron Bartolotta and James Craig. If you two would please come to the stage. While they're coming up, Camera is the current Republican state senator serving the 46th Senatorial District of Pennsylvania. She was elected in 2014 and is running for her second term of office. James is an attorney and a small business owner, and he's the Democratic candidate for the 46th Senatorial District. Welcome. Mr. Craig, you may begin with your opening statement of 1 minute.
Thank you. My name is James Craig, and I'm running for state senate. And before I start, I just want to make sure that I thank our moderator, along with our panelists, and of course my opponent, for being here tonight and making this a possibility. I made the decision to run for office in 2016 after losing my older brother Eric, to a drug overdose right up the road here in Beaver Falls. I was shocked that our leaders weren't doing more to address the crisis. And when I dug deeper, I saw that this was the case everywhere with everything. Nothing is getting done. No action on campaign finance reform or ending gerrymandering. Despite higher taxes, tolls, and fees, the roads aren't getting any better. And on the opioid epidemic, what got me started on this journey, I saw politicians talking but not investing in real solutions. And that made me mad. So I decided to run because I've always been a fighter for those who are struggling and for the common sense reforms we so desperately need. We need someone who's going to reach across the aisle and find ways to help everyone. My story is unique, my perspective is unique, and I'm going to do just that. So thank you, and I look forward to a vigorous debate tonight.
Ms. Bartolotta.
Thank you, Scott. Thank all of you for being here and being part of the electoral process. It's really vital to have as many involved as we can, and thank you all for taking the time to be here tonight. And many thanks to Penn State and the Chamber for putting this together. My name is Camera Bartolotta. I am the state senator for southwestern Pennsylvania. That's Greene County, most of Washington County, parts of Beaver County right here. In my very short freshman year, not even 4 years yet, I've been told that I have produced more meaningful legislation than any other senator in memory of decades. I attribute that to a phenomenal staff and an incredible community who is willing to speak with me, talk with me, share their concerns with me, and help me by providing advocates for so many different issues that affect every single one of your lives. I think I've been a very strong voice on many, many fronts. I've worked across the aisle. As a matter of fact, the very first bill that was signed into law, I worked hand in hand with Senator Jay Costa, the minority chair, and I look forward to 4 more years with your help, providing great service as your state senator.
Mr. Rickard.
Thank you. Mr. Craig, we'll start off with the elephant in the room, if you will, as we've had a chance at times to talk with both of you. We have district attorneys in Beaver and Dauphin counties have confirmed that they are investigating claims of fraudulent signatures on your nominating petition. Several Alacoca residents whose names and signatures appear on the petition were contacted by the Times and said they did not sign it and were never approached about signing the petition. Are you, as the candidate, ultimately responsible for all signatures on the nominating petition? And what do you say to those who claim this reflects on your integrity as a candidate?
Thank you for your question. First and foremost, I just want to start by saying that I hold my integrity very near and dear to my heart. Growing up, my dad always told me that a man is only as good as his word. And this attack on my integrity is personally very challenging to me. What I want to say is the time, you have to look at the timing. This was brought out in September. Many, many months, petitions are circulated and filed in February. The petition challenge period is in the beginning of March. If there was any concern with any single signature at all, a petition challenge should have been filed at that point in time, but it wasn't. My opponent sat on it, she waited, tried to make it into something bigger than it was. What I say often is, look at the circumstantial evidence. Even if everything that my opponent is saying about these signatures is true, I still had nearly twice the required number to get on the ballot. Why in the world would I knowingly submit signatures that were anything less than absolutely unquestionable? The fact of the matter is, I'm still trying to figure out what's going on just like everyone else is. I've met people on several of those petitions that my opponent put online who said that is definitively my signature, including many county commissioners, and notable members of society. This is just a distraction from the real issues, and frankly, this is what happened 4 years ago when my opponent ran the first time against Tim Solovay. Mysteriously, there was some investigation that was initiated right close to the election, and that cost him the election. I want to talk about the real issues, not some drummed up political issues.
Ms. Bartolotta, your response?
Yes, thank you. Of 1,200 petition signatures that were submitted by my opponent, 421 of them were proven to be forgeries. Hundreds of people have been coming out of the woodwork of late because they only saw those copies of the petitions on Facebook and other places. When I first saw the first 2 pages that were glaringly rubber stamped right in Aliquippa, I decided to take it upon myself and go door to door and knock, because I always go straight to the stores. I don't assume anything. However, of the dozen pages that were signed by my opponent, he attested before an officer of the Commonwealth, a notary public, on 12 pages of signatures. 167 of the signatures on those pages with his signature as a circulator were proven to be forgeries. Some people are deceased. My question is, enough with the internal investigation. If you signed the petition in front of a notary, how did someone who's deceased sign your paper?
Ms. Dukievich.
Ms. Bartolotta, how can we incentivize collaboration between and among traditional public school districts and public charter schools in order to increase educational opportunities and promote achievement for all students?
Thank you for your question. My nephew has 4 children. They live in Oregon. 2 of his 4 children are severely autistic, nonverbal. They are some of the individuals in our population that really need to go to a separate school away from a normal traditional public school. There are many benefits to charter schools. However, I truly feel that we really need to keep them accountable. They have to be held accountable for their test scores, for how they're teaching our children, and they have to be held to the same standards as our public schools. And we can fund those charter schools without taking funds away from our public schools with EITCs and other programs that I promote every time we have a budget.
Mr. Craig?
I think that the touchstone here is collaboration. What we see, whether it be in public school districts or public charter schools, there's not enough collaboration across the districts. We are seeing school budgets which are ballooning simply because we're duplicating overhead. What we need to do is we need to do feasibility and economic studies on each and every school so that we can determine and make sure that we're not duplicating services unnecessarily. One of the things my opponent touched on is public charter schools for people with special needs. The fact of the matter is, a lot of these charter schools, kids are sent there because it's easier to deal with their disabilities there. They need to have integration, they need to have socialization amongst every child their age. We can't just keep sending our kids to these school districts and hoping that they take care of them.
Next question, Mr. Rubino.
Mr. Craig, the human service programs that are in many parts of the state are greatly in need. Chamber members such as the United Way of Beaver County and their many agencies and affiliates receive funding support from Harrisburg. Given the fact that state funding for most of these agencies has been decreased or flatlined over the past several years, what role do you feel the state needs to play to assist them so that they can pay a competitive wage and provide services to those at risk?
Thank you. Well, as someone who's married to someone who works for a human service agency, I understand that they work too hard, they work too many hours, and they don't get paid enough. My wife, Melissa, who's sitting in the second row here, works for Wesley Family Services. She sometimes would be working 12, 14 hours a day, going into families' homes, trying to really work with them and change their lives. But she wasn't receiving the support in a financial way or from the agency itself, and it all comes down to dollars and cents. In Pennsylvania, we for too long have prioritized keeping taxes low in election years and keeping revenue where it is, cutting social programs, as opposed to really worrying about the well-being of the people of the Commonwealth. We need to increase public funding from the state for these agencies because they're dealing with people who are most at risk in this Commonwealth.
Ms. Bartolotta?
One of the things that we really need to work on in Harrisburg is holding every single department accountable for the money that they've already received. We need to have a performance-based budget. We'll never get to a zero-based budget, but at least a performance-based budget, and hold every one of those departments accountable for every dollar that they receive of taxpayer dollars. And if they haven't achieved the goals that they set forward the last budget cycle, they shouldn't receive any more. We need to tighten the belts of a lot of these different departments. They need to learn how to manage, because a lot of these departments are out of control, and they are wasting our taxpayer dollars. I was just this morning in Uniontown at a behavioral health seminar, and it was presenting the behavioral health managed care program and what it takes for counties to take advantage of these funds, and for local counties who know how to care for the people in their communities. They're the ones that know how to spend those dollars the best. And we can facilitate state funding to go to those programs, and we just need to be better at managing it.
Mr. Bickert, next question goes to you.
Ms. Bartolotta, with over 1,650 wells in Washington County, a significant portion of the 46th District has benefited greatly from Act 13 impact fees, about $7.3 million distributed in Washington County in 2017. In Beaver County, we've seen the benefit of natural gas production with the site selection of Potter Township for the Shell Chemicals cracker plant. What do you say to places like Hopewell Township and especially Aliquippa, who may not be directly benefiting from Pennsylvania's emergence as a significant energy-producing state? And should there be a statewide severance tax with a more equitable distribution?
Thank you for your question. When I first was elected, I requested to be the Vice Chair of Energy and Environmental Resources Committee for the very reason that where the district sits is Marcellus Shale Central. And it's not just gas and oil. We also have Greene County, which is the heart and soul of coal. Energy is abundant. Energy resources is tremendously abundant in our district, and we need to harvest it correctly and responsibly, but we are also proud to have the country's only impact tax. We're the only state in the country that produces gas and oil that has an impact tax on this industry. And we have received to the tune of over $1.3 billion since the beginning of the gas and oil industry. If we lose the impact tax, we're going to be sending all of the taxes, the tax revenue of a severance tax to Philadelphia and across the Commonwealth, and we will be suffering the impact that we feel from the fracking trucks, the sand trucks, the water trucks. Can we take another look at Act 13 and take a look at how we might be able to adjust it based on production? That's something that we might be able to look at, but once you put in a severance tax, you're done with the impact fee. And all of those communities that suffer the beating of the roads and bridges from all those trucks no longer get the funding in that municipality that needs it so desperately. And I have seen municipalities get millions of dollars in impact fee money, and they buy fire trucks and ambulances, and one municipality installed a life flight helipad. And the day we were there cutting the ribbon, we had to move our cars so that they could land a helicopter there and rescue someone who had a stroke up the street. The impact fee has benefited these municipalities like no other, and we need to keep it intact in Pennsylvania.
Mr. Craig.
I have to agree with many of the things my opponent said. I grew up in rural Washington County, and I've seen the actual impact from the natural gas extraction on our roads and infrastructure. I also agree that I refuse to send a single taxpayer dollar from Western Pennsylvania to Philadelphia or to any other area that has a moratorium on natural gas fracking. They want to gain the benefit of our natural resources without having to deal with the negative consequences. And I simply cannot abide that. But we need to start looking to our next industry. Natural gas jobs are here now, and they're great. And, frankly, a lot of these areas didn't have any hope for the next economy until natural gas came around. But we need to start investing smartly so that that next economy is one that's going to be sustainable. It's not going to be one that's based on how much of the product you can pull out of the ground.
Ms. Dudkiewicz, the next question is to you.
Mr. Craig, school safety is of particular concern across the country, even more so with the Parkland school mass shooting in Florida, where that state is now providing $400 million in their budget for school safety programs. In June, Governor Wolf signed a budget that will provide $60 million for school safety grants. Do you support Governor Wolf's budget? And what do you propose the school districts do to make our schools safe?
Thank you. This is an excellent question. So, first and foremost, of course I support state funding for making our schools safer. But we need to understand that making our schools safer means having trained, hired professionals who are there to protect our children, not providing guns to teachers in our schools. We also need to make sure that we are investing in mental health services. Every time there's a school shooting, we talk about mental health. And the first couple times I was hopeful there was going to be a change, but over and over again, that's just the political talking point, and no change actually occurs. If we actually invested in mental health treatment and trained our professionals, our teachers, our support staff to see the warning signs, to bring children in and talk to them if they see that they're having issues at home, we would see that this isn't a problem anymore. Unfortunately, we only have our kids in school for 7-8 hours a day. All the rest of the time, they have to go home to whatever living environment they happen to have. That can affect a child a lot. So making sure that these resources are available in schools for kids to seek their own care or be flagged by a professional will go a very, very long way towards eliminating these tragedies in the future. Thank you.
Ms. Bartolotta, your response?
Yes, thanks. I'm a member of the newly formed School Safety Task Force in the Senate, and we have had some hearings and some meetings regarding different aspects of school safety. Yes, there's a mental health element to it. When you're talking about children in school coming into the school and having a mass casualty situation. Just recently, I invited Secretary Miller and Secretary Levine to come to my district, to Bentworth School, because they have an incredible program. It's a partial program. They had kids with severe mental illness, ranging from mild all the way to the critical. Some of these they consider the worst of the worst in different schools. They have no problems with these kids at all. They get on-the-spot therapy and programs right there provided on the spot in this partial program. And I've actually convinced Secretary Levine and Miller to take a look at funding this program even more than it is. The other thing that we've done with the School Safety Task Force is I've had several meetings with a group of Israeli Defense Task Force folks, and they're telling us it's more than school shootings. We need to worry about terrorism in our schools and harden those targets. Thank you.
Mr. Rubino, the next question is to you.
Ms. Bartolotta, you are the Vice Chair of the Environmental Resources and Energy Committee. As you know, the Bruce Mansfield Power Plant and the Beaver Valley Power Station represent a reliable and sustainable supply of electricity and is a key factor in our region's economic security, not to mention a major employer here in Beaver County. With First Energy's recent announcements to close both facilities within 2 years, what legislation would you be willing to bring forward or support to require that we continue to have diverse reliable power generation sources in Pennsylvania?
It's an excellent question. We do need to have a diverse grid. We cannot put all of our eggs in one basket. Right now, with how prolific our natural gas is, it's a resource that we have too much of a good thing. It could fuel manufacturing in Pennsylvania for hundreds of years. But what if something happened to that resource? We do have to have a more reliable grid. We still have coal-fired power plants that are operating at 85% efficiency, 85% clean, but with regulations that keep raising the bar on that and requiring tougher and tougher and tougher regulations that you cannot achieve. That really puts that puts a barrier for us to have a diversified grid. And as far as nuclear energy goes, yes, it's an expensive proposition. Yes, it takes massive amounts of work once every couple of years. But you know what? That employs thousands of workers, by the way, which I'm all for. However, we do need to take a look at how we subsidize different groups of energy. A lot of people on different sides, both sides of the aisle, they don't like the word subsidy. But to help promote a type of energy, to be there when we need it, I think that's something that we really need to take a serious look at.
Mr. Craig?
So what I see over and over again is that we trade one set of jobs for another set of jobs. We're talking about the Shell cracker plant coming in saying it's going to produce 500 jobs, but we're going to be losing 500 jobs from the nuke. We keep doing this over and over again. The problem is that we can't rely just on natural gas. If it's too cold, the pipes won't run. Then we have blackouts in the middle of winter. If a pipeline breaks down, we have no backup. We're going to see dramatic increases in electric outages and blackouts. We must do what we have to in coordination with our federal elected officials to ensure that the nuke has the funding to stay open. And something that's not a subsidy that would help with this a lot is the fact that the natural gas utility is not regulated by the PUC. They're able to set whatever rates they want, and they're undercutting the other industries right now to drive them out of business.
Mr. Bickert?
Mr. Craig, according to Site Selection Magazine, the top 5 reasons a business moves or expands operations are due to availability of skilled labor, geographic accessibility, cost of labor and construction, corporate tax rates, and state and local and state incentives. What would you support in terms of corporate tax reform? Pennsylvania ranks 43rd and 34th overall for our tax climate. And would you continue to support tax incentives like the Keystone Opportunity Zones and DCED-funded neighborhood assistance programs?
Thank you. First and foremost, I want to say that these tax incentive programs are the prime economic drivers of community and economic development in certain areas. They're very important. As a real estate attorney, someone who does real estate and community development, I understand that these are what it takes sometimes to get businesses, get developers into communities that really need investment. So as far as those are concerned, I'm all for Keystone Opportunity Zones, tax incentives like that. But the problem is, oftentimes what we see is these extended graduated periods of time where people aren't paying taxes. Businesses shouldn't have a tax holiday for 25 years after they build their business there. By that time, the entire neighborhood's changed. One of the specific reforms that I'd like to see is a closing of the Delaware loophole. The large corporations take advantage of the Delaware loophole to place the burden of corporate taxation on small businesses, mom and pop shops who don't have an expensive, high-powered attorney to figure out how to create a complicated corporate structure to make sure that they're avoiding these corporate taxes. This would also have the second effect of bringing a substantial amount of revenue into the state of Pennsylvania so that we can invest it in things that are important, like building out our infrastructure, creating regional rail, investing in our public schools, and combating the opioid epidemic.
Ms. Bartolotta?
Thank you. Along the DCED front, I just wanted to mention that my office was instrumental in giving letters of support to bring in $3.5 million in DCED fund to Aliquippa. So we are very, very happy that we were able to do that. There are a lot of things that can be done along those lines. The opportunity zones are important because, sometimes when you offer a tax break or a tax incentive to a company, a lot of the folks are saying, well, wait a second, we need that tax here. Two things. One, they'll go elsewhere where it's going to be offered. And two, if you have a 10-year plan for a tax break, that brings in massive amounts of capital investment into an area that otherwise would not be there. It brings jobs to that area. It brings development, and sometimes it rehabilitates neighborhoods. To bring those jobs in, those people that are now working, they're paying taxes. They're buying items and goods from local businesses as well. So I think it's an influx to the economy.
Ms. Dudkiewicz, next question is to you.
Ms. Bartolotta, the previous question cited cost of labor in construction as an importance for corporate location selection. Where do you stand with right-to-work legislation? And what are your thoughts to the advantages or disadvantages?
I am a no on right to work, which is a surprise to some of my other Republican colleagues. But being in the Southwest and understanding that this is generational union folks, we have labor out there. I'm endorsed and supported by numerous building trades because I know that they show up. They're highly trained, they're highly skilled, they stick through with the job, and they do an excellent job. So I am a no on right to work. And again, I'm all for the trade unions who work so brilliantly all across Pennsylvania. As far as the previous question, to go back to it for a moment, we do have the highest corporate net income tax in Pennsylvania. It's prohibitive for a lot of investment. We're also missing out on hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of investment, if not billions of dollars of investment, and tens of thousands of really good paying jobs because this administration is not allowing Pennsylvania to take advantage of the 100% depreciation of capital investment. That's a big deal. Businesses are going elsewhere, and we already have proof that we've lost hundreds of millions of dollars in investment in Pennsylvania. We have to have a better and more friendly business climate.
Mr. Craig.
I am a vehement no on right to work. And unlike my opponent, I am also a vehement no on paycheck deception. Our labor unions provide quality, family-sustaining jobs for countless individuals in southwestern Pennsylvania. My father was a steelworker. My grandfather was a steelworker. I don't know what my great-grandfather did, but he was probably a steelworker. We must fight this onslaught against our labor unions, against working men and women now, because if we don't watch the ball, the corporate interests, the dark money, the special interests are going to come in, they're going to steal elections from us, and we are going to become a right-to-work state. You have my pledge that I will never, ever vote to make Pennsylvania a right-to-work state or vote in favor of paycheck deception.
Can I respond quickly?
Sure.
Just to that? It's paycheck protection. And I did vote yes on only one portion of paycheck protection because I wouldn't vote for paycheck protection for dues. I'm a member of 2 unions. I wish they would take the dues out of my check. It's challenging to remember to write it all the time. But as far as the other part of paycheck protection, I do not feel that any employer has the right to take money out of your paycheck and send it to a politician. Thank you.
Mr. Rubino.
Mr. Craig, one of the more difficult issues facing many of our municipalities is the lack of volunteers for our local fire departments. Act 172, which permits local municipalities to give tax credits for volunteer firefighters, is helping. But the problems of attracting and retaining persist. What suggestions do you have to address the issue of volunteerism and the lack of people to fill important local municipal roles, such as firefighters, police, and public services?
Thank you. First and foremost, I've talked to so many volunteer fire department chiefs because my closing company does free closings for firefighters, so I'm in constant contact with them. And they're saying that the number one problem with recruitment and with that tax incentive is that people don't know about it. So getting the word out to to individuals in the community is an important first step. But we really need to look at how high the bar is to volunteer your service. I looked into becoming a volunteer firefighter. It was something like 120 hours of training within a 6-month period. I've gone through first aid training. I've gone through, I have my Eagle Scout award. Yet that is prohibiting people from joining and volunteering in their communities. We need to see what roles they can serve, perhaps that would allow people who have gone through this training to be free to actually go out there and fight fires. And despite what I've heard a lot of cynics say about this, it's not because millennials don't want to volunteer. Our generation is the most prone to public service. We're the most prone to volunteering and helping out our communities. So really, we need to look at those two things, getting the word out there on the incentives and the benefits to being a volunteer fighter, but also just making it more possible for people who are working 40 hours a week in their own job to volunteer on behalf of their community.
Ms. Bartolotta?
Thank you. I have voted yes on many bills that come across my desk when it comes to encouraging volunteer firefighters. They get the brunt of everything, and their numbers are shrinking all of the time. I also know that there are several different firehouses across southwestern Pennsylvania where they don't require a lot of training, which is a little scary because they're really putting their lives on the line when it comes to addressing a fire and an emergency. There are different things that are coming down. The Veterans and Emergency Preparedness Committee, I was a member of that committee until just this recent year. There are things that we can do to encourage the forgiveness of some student loans, the tax incentive is an excellent thing, but there's a lot of these volunteer firefighters who are very young, and some of them are living at home. So some of that doesn't really encourage them to participate. But I do believe that if we can help them with some student loan forgiveness, I think that'll go a long way to encourage these younger people to come in.
This is Final Jeopardy. Alex Trebek, from the debate. Yeah, you get it. Ms. Bartolotta, according to the National Education Association, public education across the United States on average is funded 8.4% by the federal government, 46% by the state government, and 45.6% by the local government. In Pennsylvania, the federal government funds 7.9%, which is a half a percentage point lower. The state funds 35.2%, which is almost 11% lower. And the local government, i.e. property tax funds, 56.9%, which is 11.3% higher. Why is Pennsylvania so out of whack in our ratio between state and local funding versus U.S. average? And of course, with our neighbors in Ohio and West Virginia. And secondly, what would you propose to alleviate the burden being placed on the local property taxes in our state?
That has been a hot topic for years and years and years and years, and trying to get a bill across the plate in the legislature is like pushing rope uphill. There is a huge issue with property tax, school property tax, and that's one of the things that I noticed when I knocked almost 9,000 doors 4 years ago when I was running for this office. I asked everyone I talked to, I don't care what kind of a home they were in, what their biggest concerns were. Those in really beautiful homes in great neighborhoods, property tax didn't come up. Standing in the doorway of several elderly women who burst into tears when I said the words school property tax, because they lost their homes that they'd had paid for years. They were widowed and they're living in these small apartments because they couldn't afford the ever-increasing property tax. We have to do better for these folks. We absolutely have to do better. And I'm really glad that last year we actually put forth a vote to put on the ballot the opportunity for the people of Pennsylvania to vote. Do you want the legislature to find a way to eliminate school property tax? Overwhelming yes. Now we're tasked with the job. How do we fill that hole? At the moment, it is a $14.5 billion hole. How do we fill it? I was adamant in the beginning, if we're going to broaden the sales tax across the board, increase sales tax on everything. Can we not harm those individuals that are the most vulnerable, our seniors on fixed incomes? And how about all those moms, those single moms that are trying to put their kids through school or working 3 jobs and can't afford a 6% increase on their child care? We have to think of this wisely. We've got to look at all the unintended consequences. So I'm very happy to say, too, that during the 4 years that I've been in office, we have been able to increase funding for public education by about $1 billion over the last 4 years. We're putting more into education than we ever have before. My goal is to make sure that those education dollars actually go to the classroom.
Mr. Craig, your thoughts?
I wish I had gotten the 2 minutes instead of the 1 on this. This is what I do professionally. I've litigated over 300 real estate assessment appeal defenses on behalf of homeowners. And I've found that there is no way to fix our current broken funding system for our public schools in Pennsylvania. What we need to do is change the way we fund our schools. We need to push it towards a new revenue source, which is why I'm calling on the legislature to legalize and tax recreational marijuana, which has been studied and shown to bring in $1.1 billion per year in taxes and excise taxes. This will be earmarked 100% for public school funding in perpetuity, can't be rated by the legislature, and it will be able to reduce or dramatically eliminate the property taxes on every Pennsylvanian's primary residence. This will have the added benefit of eliminating the cycles of poverty you see in these school districts where poor school districts continue to be poor because they don't have as much wealth in their local economies. I'd love to talk about this one more, but I'm out of time.
One sentence response?
Sure, go ahead.
If it raises $1.1 billion to legalize marijuana, where's the other $13.3 billion going to come from?
Commercial property taxes.
Well, we couldn't give you 1 minute or 2 minutes on that remark, but I can give you 2 minutes for your closing remarks.
Thank you very much.
Craig?
Before getting into my closing remarks, I want to again thank the panelist, moderator, and my opponent. We really should do more of these. Tonight I want to end where I started, which is why I'm running. I'm running for office because I want to serve. I grew up homeless, attended an underperforming public school, and by all accounts, I shouldn't be where I am today. I'm lucky. And it's only because of the help of kind-hearted friends and neighbors that I was able to graduate from high school, get into college, and open my own small business. But you shouldn't have to be lucky to be able to succeed in America. For too many people, the American dream is just that, a dream. They can't afford health care, let alone college. And homeownership, forget about it. And without these things, people lose hope. They lose the belief that tomorrow can be better than today with hard work. I am constantly reminded that so many of the problems we talked about tonight, and even more that we didn't talk about, are all symptoms of the underlying corruption in our society. There's a serious problem. Pennsylvania is consistently ranked among the most corrupt states in the United States. And year after year, we elect politicians who promise to change the system, but end up with the system changing them. We should have leaders who understand these systemic problems and have real ideas about how to fix them. And I may be idealistic, but we need big ideas to address our biggest problems. And I won't stop fighting until we get there. We've only briefly touched on corruption tonight, but it's important that you understand what I'm fighting for. I'm talking about finally passing term limits, ending gerrymandering, reforming our corrupt campaign finance system, fixing our legislature so 240 days of work over a 4-year term isn't counted as full-time. Will these solve all of our problems? Of course not. Corruption's always going to be there, but we're making it too easy on corrupt politicians nowadays. I'm proud to say that I've released every tax return I've ever filed in my life, and I believe myself to be someone who leads by example, and that's why I'm asking for your vote on November 6th, because it's time that we have more leaders that lead by example. Thank you.
Ms. Bartolotta, your closing remarks.
Thank you very much. It's hard for me to stand here and listen to someone talk about corruption and changing the Harrisburg and leading by example when there's 421 forged signatures on 1,200 petition signatures. Sorry. You know what? I agree. My opponent has a really heartbreaking story, and pulling oneself up from their bootstraps is remarkable and commendable. But you know what? Everybody has a story. You can never, ever assume that the person standing next to you doesn't have a similar one. My first home was a floating tar paper shack in Alaska. My dad was a lumberjack. My mother was 18 and she had 2 kids. So everybody has a story. Shortly after that, we moved to Las Vegas, where she took on 3 jobs because when I was 2, my sister was 4, and she was 20, my dad left. So she worked 3 jobs, never took a dime from anyone. She scrubbed toilets at the Dunes Hotel as a maid. She was a waitress. She also worked on a switchboard. A lot of you millennials, that's when they used to take the cords out, and yeah, it's not cell phones. But she worked really hard, and in her spare time collected pop bottles that people threw out the windows of their cars along the desert highway to repeat for food. Everybody has a story. Every one of you has a challenge. And every one of you has gone to school and gotten a job and worked, and God bless all of you for that. But you know what? All of those experiences put me in a position where I can understand everybody else's story. And I can understand how hard it is sometimes for a single mom to decide whether to pay the heating bill, or to put food on the table, or to buy clothes for her kids, or do short shoes. I get it. I've been there. I know what that's like. And you know what? I also know what it's like to work 12 hours a day in a new business to do every single thing that's required. And I know what it's like to sign the front of a paycheck. I know what the American dream is like. And thank you all for being here this evening.
On behalf of the Chamber of Commerce, let's hear it for Ms. Bartolotta.